Hello, you're on the Ruslan Belov channel, and today we're going to discuss the situation in Ukraine as of July 17th, 2025. A large number of very important events took place today, and before we begin, I sincerely ask you to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. It really helps the channel grow. Thank you to everyone who has subscribed. First of all, I'd like to point out that today, in these very days, perhaps even these hours, these very minutes, we have arrived at what appears to be the climax of the 2025 summer military campaign. Right now, a key battle is unfolding for a small settlement. It's not Pokrovsk, not Kupiansk, not Konstantinovka, and certainly not Sumy. It's a small locality along the line of contact where a major battle is currently taking place, and the outcome of this battle could have major consequences. Of course, the Russian army is unlikely to reach Kyiv as a direct result of this engagement, but they may significantly improve their position in a specific sector. Very heavy fighting is now underway there. Reports indicate that the Ukrainian side is in a very poor position. Russian units are not yet releasing official updates. For now, all we have are sporadic messages, often shared in local chat groups by civilians who see what's happening and pass along information through friends and acquaintances. So let's begin, step by step, starting with the Zaporizhzhia sector. Here too, the Russian army is advancing, though this isn't the main battle of the day. Spoiler alert, today the Russian Ministry of Defense officially announced the complete clearing of the settlement known as Kamyanske, 4 days after geolocated footage had already been posted publicly. Let me remind you that the settlement was actually cleared by Russian forces several days ago. For example, this footage was published on July 8th, clearly showing Russian soldiers in different parts of Kamyansk, raising both the Russian flag and their unit's banner. Based on this footage, we marked almost the entire settlement under Russian control, except for the northeastern residential sector. Then, on July 14th, more footage emerged, this time from the Ukrainian side, showing Russian assault units clearing the last building in Kamyansk. These units came under FPV drone strikes. So as of July 14th, Kamyansk was already fully under the control of the Russian armed forces. But only today has the Ministry of Defense officially confirmed it. Kamyansk is now completely cleared. Fighting continues near the village of Plavny, where the Russian army is gradually advancing northward toward the town of Stepnohirsk. More specifically, they are pushing into the third residential sector of Stepnohirsk, where intense combat is underway. Speaking more broadly about the Zaporizhzhia sector, various Ukrainian officials reported today that the Russian army has begun a major redeployment of forces from Mariupol and the Zaporizhzhia-Kherson region to the front line, seemingly preparing to break through and advance toward Zaporizhzhia city. At the very least, Russia may be preparing to launch full-scale assaults on Orikhiv and Huliai-Pol. Western media are even citing figures. Today reports emerged that Russia has assembled a 160,000-strong force. They don't specify exactly where, but somewhere along the front. And not just 160,000 troops. This is a large army with a huge number of tanks, armored vehicles, IFVs, and APCs. They point out that since 2024, Russia has mostly relied on small assault teams, squads of 2 or 3 soldiers, using very little heavy equipment and often with outdated vehicles that had been repaired and sent back into battle. But now all the new hardware seems to have been concentrated in one sector. The Russian army appears ready to launch a new offensive, but it's unclear yet whether that will be on the Zaporizhzhia or Pokrovsk front. Next, we move on to the junction between the South Donetsk and Dnipropetrovsk directions. After a short operational pause, Russian forces have resumed their advance here. Even pro-Ukrainian cartographers confirm this. Russian troops have improved their positions northwest of Zelensky. Their goal is to approach the village of Timirov. There are also reports of Russian advances toward Yanuarske, formerly Shevchenko. Recently, Voskresenka came under Russian control, and now the Russians are preparing to push further toward Malyivka and Yanuarske. It's important to note that both Malyivka and Yanuarske are located in Dnipropetrovsk Oblast, and although Russian forces have reached the edge of this region in some places, we haven't yet seen a full-scale offensive into Dnipropetrovsk territory. But the Russian army might now be ready for such an operation. Meanwhile, pro-Ukrainian cartographers are still focused on the western part of Donetsk Oblast, specifically the area between Oleksandrograd, Andriivka, Klevtsovo, Zeleny High, and the small village of Hrushivske. Here, Russian troops are steadily moving westward, and some pro-Russian sources have also highlighted fresh developments. After clearing most of the key settlements along the Mokry-Yaly River, Russian forces have now redirected attention to Novopavlivka, which is also in Dnipropetrovsk Oblast. The offensive here is coming from several directions. From the south, through Novokatska, Yalta, Zaporizhzhia, and Tolstoy, and from the east, through the towns of Horokov and Troitske. Apparently, regardless of what exact strategic plans the Russian command has, their task here is clear: cut off the remaining Ukrainian-controlled area of Donetsk Oblast in this direction, eliminating the salient north of Novokranka, Zeleny Kut, and Alexeyevka. Russian forces are now actively working toward this objective. In fact, some mapping channels have already started to mark this pocket as Russian-controlled, suggesting a major move may be imminent. Now we move on to the Pokrovsk sector, where the main battle of the 2025 summer campaign is taking place. And as I said earlier, this isn't a fight for Pokrovsk itself, nor for Mirnohrad or Novoe Ekonomichne. Surprisingly, the decisive battle is now centered around the small settlement of Rodinske, located north of the Pokrovsk agglomeration. To be more precise, the fighting is taking place for 3 settlements: Rodinske, Suketska, and Krasny Lyman. This is the epicenter of the fierce clash. Neither side is holding back on resources. The Russian command is betting on surprise and speed. The Russian General Staff understands very clearly that dragging out the battle for Rodinske, like for Vauvchansk or Chasiv Yar, is not an option. A prolonged urban battle is completely unviable. Ukraine's reserves are stretched thin. Some are deployed in Vauvchansk, others in Sumy, some near Kostiantynivka, some in Toretsk, some in Zaporizhzhia, and others are still active around Chasiv Yar or near Siversk. There are mounting personnel issues. Desertions are frequently reported. The situation is difficult. The Russian army decided to exploit this weakness, and after breaking through Ukrainian lines north and northeast of Novoe Ekonomichne, Russian forces are pushing westward to gain control of Rodinske. If Ukraine loses this town, its forces risk encirclement in the Pokrovsk-Mirnohrad region. As for today's events and posts, we've gathered a lot of interesting information. Reports surfaced this morning that some Russian assault groups attempted to storm the Krasnolymanska mine. However, by the morning of July 17th, Ukrainian forces had repelled these attacks and the Russians retreated. But it's likely these weren't full assaults, rather reconnaissance in force missions. Later in the day, objective monitoring footage began appearing, showing FPV drone strikes hitting Ukrainian personnel and equipment near Rodinske. Despite the overwhelming number of drones in the skies over the Pokrovsk area, the Ukrainian side has no option but to keep throwing troops and vehicles into the battle, regardless of the losses. Losing Rodinske would have dire strategic consequences. Footage shows Russian equipment actively engaged. Also, today we saw images of the Ukrainian side trying to strengthen their positions. For example, this road between Pokrovsk and Rodinske is completely covered with anti-drone mesh. However, the author of the video points out that the mesh has already been badly damaged by ongoing combat in the area. And of course, the most important updates came in just before we began preparing this video. Today, several posts were published across a number of independent Telegram channels from various sources, both pro-Ukrainian and pro-Russian. Let's read this particular message to better understand the current situation. This post was either translated or originally posted by a pro-Ukrainian source. Here's what it says. They're already at Suketska, the shaft, and the mine. Until today, I kept my spirits up, holding on to hope, but now everything has collapsed. I don't know when this pain will ease. Rodinske, it hurts to be without all of you. Today we are receiving information suggesting that Russian army units, as a result of their offensive actions, managed to enter the Krasnolymanska mine, most likely by evening. Additionally, Russian forces reportedly took control of the mine's ventilation shaft, and according to the same publication, they also entered the village of Suketske. It's difficult to determine exactly what the author meant, whether they were referring to the village Suketske or perhaps the nearby forest area known as Suketsky. But either way, Russian forces appear to be present in that area. If we sum up everything published over the past 24 hours, it becomes clear that Russian troops are now trying to secure positions along this red line. And this truly is a critical battle, with Rodinske being the key settlement. If Ukraine loses control of it, their forces will be encircled without question. The Russian army could then trap Pokrovsk and Minohorod in a cauldron. Meanwhile, we know that Russian forces are constantly pressing in the area of Udakne and Molodetska, trying to push northward toward the next mine, Pokrovska mine. If they manage to seize it, they'll shorten the distance to Serhivka and the M30 highway. We're also receiving a large amount of footage from the area around Doropilia. This location is now a critical supply hub for the armed forces of Ukraine, and we can see that this supply node is under full control by FPV drone operators from the Russian military. In this footage, we can see another train convoy ambushed and destroyed by dozens of drones. As a result, several trains appear to have suffered critical damage, possibly even destroyed entirely. It seems the supply lines here have been blocked. There are clearly major issues with unloading, transport, and logistics overall. The situation is becoming extremely difficult for the Ukrainian side. Just north of there, around the railway station or perhaps a nearby junction, more surveillance footage has been published showing another Ukrainian convoy, likely military vehicles, ambushed and destroyed again using FPV drones. This is the very place and moment where the decisive battle is taking place, the outcome of which may determine the course of the next 50 days. These are the same 50 days that, as we remember, Donald Trump gave the Russian Federation to continue its military operations, after which serious sanctions would follow. But judging by how the situation is unfolding, and if the reports about the Krasnolimanska mine, Suketske, and the ventilation shaft are confirmed and accurate, then the fate of the entire Pokrovsk agglomeration is nearly sealed. At the same time, we're getting reports that Russia is attempting to expand its control northward as well. It appears the Russian General Staff understands the broader picture and is beginning to exert pressure on Ukrainian defenses to the north, this time toward Druzhkivka. Of course, Druzhkivka is still far off, and this is not a one-month offensive, but slowly, steadily, Russian forces are advancing in this direction. Over the past 24 hours, numerous geolocations have confirmed intense activity by Russian aviation, thermobaric flamethrower systems, and multiple launch rocket systems. Ukrainian defenses in this area are gradually being eroded. We expect further tactical updates. Additionally, today the Russian Ministry of Defense reported that the Center military group has fully cleared the settlement of Popiv Yar. Based on this report, we've updated the control map. Just yesterday, most of this settlement was in the grey zone or obscured by the fog of war. Today, based on the official report, it's marked as under Russian control. These map updates indicate that battles are now taking place around Poltavka and along the road westward from Poltavka toward Volodymyrivka and Shakov. The Russian army is widening its penetration in this sector, trying to expand a corridor for a possible breakthrough northwest, again toward Doropilia. It's difficult to predict how things will unfold here in the coming days, or how the Russian army will act, or what exact objectives the Russian General Staff has set. But from what we see now, it's fair to say that the Ukrainian defensive line here has either already collapsed or is on the verge of collapse. As for the Kostiantynivka sector, there is no major news today. The only notable development is a video published by the Ukrainian side from the village of Predtekine. In the footage, we can see a Ukrainian FPV drone dropping a grenade on a Russian flag that was placed at a high elevation, most likely the highest point of Predtekine. To some extent, this video confirms the presence of Russian soldiers who raised that flag and partially corroborates the earlier Russian Ministry of Defense report claiming control over the village. A few days ago, the ministry announced the capture of Predtekine, though we haven't seen any objective control footage until now. This video may serve as that confirmation. Now we move toward the Siversk sector. There are no map updates here, but Russian artillery units and FPV drone operators are highly active. This footage of bombardment likely indicates that artillery preparation is underway for the next assault or offensive push. The Russian army isn't advancing dozens of square kilometers per day in this sector. The advance is slow and methodical, but it's happening. And we can see that after each artillery strike, Russian units manage to improve their positions significantly. It's possible that in the coming days we'll receive confirmation that Serebryanka has been cleared, or perhaps Novoselivka. Some pro-Russian cartographers have already marked Novoselivka fully under Russian control, suggesting the front line here might now look very different. Now we head to the northeastern part of Kharkiv Oblast. Fighting here mainly unfolds along the Vovcha River. As we discussed yesterday, Russian troops managed to establish a foothold on the western outskirts of Vauvchansk and took control of the oil plant. Based on geolocations published yesterday, we updated the map accordingly. Today we're seeing additional information that Russian forces are advancing through the forest west of Vauvchansk. These map updates are being shared by the pro-Ukrainian deep state team, and we've applied them, marking some of the area as contested or grey zone. A very important update has come in from the far northeastern corner of Kharkiv Oblast, from the village of Datian. Today, the Russian Ministry of Defense announced that troops from the North Group have fully cleared this settlement. Based on reports from both the Ministry of Defense and the North Military Group, we've updated the map accordingly. We see that the Russian army continues to advance. It's possible that the reported 160,000-strong force belongs to this North Group, and in the near future, we may see a major escalation in both northeastern and eastern Ukraine. Now we move on to the Sumy sector. Intense fighting continues here, especially along what is now essentially the second line of Ukrainian defense. Ukrainian forces continue to launch counterattacks toward Kondrativka. The Russian army is striking back with air power, inflicting serious damage on Ukrainian assault troops. We can see that despite some initial successes in the early days of Ukraine's counter-offensive, their advance has now stalled. Ukrainian troops are unable to push forward under heavy Russian airstrikes. Russian forces control the southern and eastern parts of Kondrativka, and there's no indication that they plan to retreat. At the same time, for the first time in a long while, we've received a report suggesting that Russian forces have nearly cleared the southern part of Yunakivka. According to some neutral cartographers, by the end of July 17, the Russian army controlled 70% of the village and is continuing to advance. We may soon see confirmation of this from the Ministry of Defense or receive new geolocation footage. And that's all for now, dear friends. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, give it a like, and all the best to you.